in Israel. And yeah, please.
Well, good morning, everyone. And together with the Danish Industry Foundation, I'm happy to welcome you to the first webinar, the first out of 3, on what startups can do to survive unforeseen crisis and navigate safely through crisis. As William just mentioned, my name is Lasse. I'm the head of the Innovation Center Denmark here in Tel Aviv. And our mission is to strengthen the relationship between Denmark and Israel in the space of research and innovation. During this webinar, we will point to methodologies that startups can use and apply to become more crisis resilient. And today we'll focus on the importance of strategic partnerships and networks. After our 3 webinars, and by the way, the next webinar will take place same time, same place next week. After 3 webinars, we will come to Denmark and teach a course, a classroom course at different locations in Denmark. And again, we are trying to bring startup methodologies from Israel to Denmark to help Danish startups scale and become more international using best practice here from Israel. If you want to participate in the classroom course, give us a ring, write to us, or visit our website, Denmark in Israel. I think now it's the time to give the floor to Gali Michaeli, who is the Director of Consumer Success at Explorium. And she will I know she has an awesome workshop waiting for us. Just one last comment. After the workshop, we have a special guest performance, so stay tuned. Gali, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Let me just share my screen and I'll be starting. So hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining. Thank you, the Danish Innovation Center, for having me. What I'm going to do in the next almost hour is try to walk through some of both my personal experience and the experience of many, many peers and colleagues that I've learned from over the years, in everything to do with business development and managing clients based on building actual, deep and trust-based relationships. I'd love to make this as open as possible. So please, again, if you're comfortable, show your face. Please comment in the chat, and we'll try to kind of get to questions and answers, or even raise your hand. And I will have a little bit of participation going on just to make it a little bit more interactive, because sometimes these things can be a little bit hard to focus on. So I'll try to make it as fun as possible. I called this Master Your Relationships. And can everybody see my screen just before I start? Somebody nod. Okay, great, awesome. Okay. So before I start, I called this Master Your Relationships because I've been doing business in various industries for the last 15 years. And in all of them, I found that I've succeeded the most when I managed to actually build relationships that are almost resembling of, my friendships at home. Because when you actually care on a very personal and emotional level about the person that you're working with, or about their goals as well as your own, it creates better business for everybody. There's research to support that theme, but I have to say that I've found it very personally true. And so I've kind of made sure to deepen my understanding of how to do that, how to do it better, what to do more of, etc. Before we move into who am I? So I'm Gali Michaeli. I'm currently head of customer success at Explorium, an Israeli startup that has raised about $52 million in the space of data science and machine learning. I was at Google before that, managing partners and customers. I was a VP business development at one startup, and actually a VP finance operations and strategy at another before that. And I started my career in management consulting. So working with some of the biggest corporates on their 5-year strategy, M&As, marketing strategy, everything to do with how we grow our business in both the short and long term. in the Israeli military, as you know, in Israel, that's a big thing. I served in the 8200 unit, which you may have heard of. It's a big technological intelligence unit. And I also spent about 12 years volunteering at a nonprofit that does consulting to other nonprofits. So helping bring business best practices to nonprofit organizations, trying to give a little bit back. And what I've learned in all these years is that the place where I excelled the most were the places where I was able to build the relationships and build the network that enabled me to succeed. I think that, you know, most of the roles in all of the startups and at Google that I got were thanks to having built strong network and maintained relationships over the years. I can't say that I have much of a network at all in Denmark, but one of the reasons that I was excited to accept this offer was to maybe start building that as well. And I'm currently managing customers across EMEA, so from Israel to the UK and everything in between. Customers in various verticals, CPG and retail and finance, fintech, e-commerce, and many more. And I'd be happy to talk about that separately. So today I want to talk about, about relationships and building relationships in business. It's primarily focused on customers and partners, but I think that it's absolutely not only relevant for that, it's also relevant for, working with colleagues, for talking to your boss, for, managing people. I think, it's, and everything in between. And that's kind of the way that I look at it. And what I've found is that, actually one more thing before I continue, I don't think I'm going to be telling you anything that will be 100% new to you. Like, I think you guys already know most of what I'm going to be talking about. And what I find when I do this webinar, and I've actually done this as like a longer workshop with some teams as well, is that it helps everybody in the room as well as myself to just kind of remember and reiterate how important some of the things that maybe we already know are, but sometimes forget to do kind of as we live our lives and as we do our business. And so what I'd like you guys to all take or to all notice is, what's the one or two things that, maybe you already know, but you've forgotten, or maybe you know, but are harder for you to execute on, and maybe I can help you remember more. Put a post-it on your screen at the end of this webinar of the one thing that you're going to take with you to remember to do tomorrow morning in your next conversation, in your next meetings. And if I've done that, I'll feel like I've succeeded. And I'd be happy to actually hear in the chat at the end of it, if there's one thing that, that you've taken that you feel is valuable. So when I look at, the kind of the key elements of building and maintaining relationships, I would say that these are the 5 things that I want to focus on today that I think are the most important. And 5 is a big number. So the first is obviously creating and growing a network, creating relationships to begin with, getting in a room where you don't know anybody, or a Zoom where you don't know anybody, and starting a conversation in a meaningful way that will create a basis to move from. Once you do that, you need to actually know who the people are that you're talking to. In my context, it's normally clients, but again, it doesn't have to be. It can be partners, it could be your boss, whoever it is that you're trying to maintain a relationship with and relay a message to. And, at the end of the day, probably sell to. And I don't think selling, is a bad word. We're all startups. At the end of the day, what we need to do is do business. So we need to know who they are, what they want, what drives them in order to be successful in working with them. The second thing, and I think this is a really critical one, is winning people's trust. So if we can have people trust us, it'll be much easier to do business. It'll be much easier to have a good and fun relationship. Everything really will be. I mean, think about your friends and your family, right? At the end of the day, a lot of those relationships are deeply based on trust. And I think that there's no reason not to transfer that principle to the business world as well. In business, we are talking about something that I have to offer, a product, a service, a partnership, something along those lines. And despite the fact that we all have, the thing that we believe or the thing that we're selling or creating, it's not all 100% relevant to 100% of the people we'll talk to. And so tailoring that offering or the story around that offering based on the needs of the person who's standing in front of us is often super, super critical to actually succeeding in working with them. And last but not least is how the conversation actually goes. And this is relevant for any conversation, with somebody new or, a 2-hour sales pitch and everything in between. And I'm not going to go too deeply into storytelling because I think, storytelling is in itself probably a webinar or a day or a year of learning. But I think that there are some elements to it that are easily replicable because they're almost mechanical, that if we remember can take us a long way into having a useful and effective conversation. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about today. So let's dive in, I guess. And the first one is obviously networking. So I'd like to ask everybody to kind of, when I say the word networking, if you can write in the chat, what are the first words that come to mind? Are they positive? Are they negative? What kind of feeling do you get when I say the word networking? Right? Imagine you're walking into a room, you don't know anybody. What comes to mind? Are you happy in that room? Are you anxious in that room? Positive but scary, anxious, energy draining. Absolutely. I've heard people say things like fake or inauthentic. I've heard people say, oh, somebody says every day, well done. So you're definitely used to that. Curious, that's amazing. That's a really good way of looking at it. I've heard people say it's a selfish thing to do because it's me, wanting to get something out of people. Amazing. Somebody just wrote opportunity. Thank you, Durant. So many people, so little time, how to find the right one. That is very good. So that's absolutely true. Opportunities, connecting. Oh, wow. You guys are already pros. Okay. So what I've learned over the years is that one of the most important things when you're even approaching networking is to think about it in the sense of giving back or giving more or giving first or just, being there in order to provide something, give something to somebody, add some value rather than only get some value and find the right people. Now, I'm not saying that the goal isn't personal or even selfish in the business sense, right? I'm not saying that the goal of networking isn't at the end of the day to create opportunities for myself, for my business, for whatever it is. But I think that when we understand that the way to get there goes through finding something to give to somebody, finding, a genuine, authentic way for myself to interact with people. And also, to be honest, doing our homework, researching who's in that room that would even be interesting, and keeping also an open mind to people who I might not think are relevant to myself or my business, but may end up being, either super relevant or having the right connections or having something to offer me that I didn't even know I needed, or just being fun, cool people that I have great chemistry with, which, I'm not saying we should all be looking for friends all the time, but definitely, as you guys are correctly writing, these are opportunities that I don't always know what will come out of. And so when I approach networking, when I was managing partners and doing business development and literally walking into rooms back before COVID, when there were rooms to walk into, not knowing anybody, picking up a glass of wine, finding somebody to talk to about the industry that I was in, which was media at the time. It's really about, first of all, understanding your value. What do I have to offer that I can maybe give somebody? And by the way, a compliment is something that we give somebody sometimes. We'll talk about that more in a second. But also thinking, how do I find what to give them? And creating a conversation that is not based on what I want to know or learn or get, but is based on being genuinely interested in what the person in front of me, who they are, what they need, what they want, what they're doing, what their business is, and what value can I add to that, usually fosters a really smart and really effective start to that situation. And luckily, there are experts more than I. And the Harvard Business Review actually summarized some research by some behavioral science professors into several key principles around networking, around, kind of coming into a situation where we don't know people and trying to create that initial start of a conversation or a relationship. And so basically they said a few things. The first one is to shift your mindset, right? So instead of thinking, it's scary, what if people aren't interested in me? it's energy draining, things like that. Usually you can look at it as the difference between introverts and extroverts as well, right? If you shift your mindset and before walking into that situation, you literally tell yourself, like actually say the words in your brain, right? It's an opportunity. I learn something. I might meet somebody interesting. I might, anything positive, depending on what motivates you personally, right? I think it's different for different people. If you actually tell yourself that before walking into the situation, just that mindset shift creates a change in how energy draining or not energy draining it could be for you, and therefore what you can get out of it as a professional in that situation. The second thing, and this is actually going to be reiterated in a moment again, is to identify common interests. Now, if we're all working in the same industry, right, or if we're all part of startups, that's a good first step. But it could be a common interest that has nothing to do with work. It could be a common interest that has to do with the fact that, we both have small children. It really doesn't matter what that specific common interest is. What the research shows is that relationships that are based on common work are much deeper. And in order to get to the place where we have something to collaborate on, we need to try to identify that. I have actually a good example. I'm part of a really large group of customer success executives. And I occasionally try to make sure that I'm having, at this point, it's a virtual coffee with at least one of them. And I was having a chat with one, and we started talking about, in this case, the common interest was really simple, right? It's customer success. We're both trying to build out teams and learn the best practices of what we're doing. And we were having a conversation, and at some point I told him, you know what? This insight that we just realized together could actually be a blog post, because it's not trivial to me, and so it might not be trivial to other people, which led to us writing a blog post together. We actually posted it yesterday, which led to myself getting to actually know this guy way better than most of the other people in that forum, because we actually we collaborated for a couple of weeks trying to create some content together. Now, I hope it's not the last one that I'll collaborate on with him, because it was great. But now I've created a connection that I don't even know what opportunities this will stem for either of us in the future, but I've truly created a much more meaningful connection than just that virtual coffee chat. And so, just identifying that this was something that is interesting to us both, creating content around customer success best practices, was super influential, super impactful. And this is from the last couple of weeks. So that was number 3. Number 4 is thinking really broadly about what you can give. I can tell you that in the beginning of my career, my thought was always, I'm young, I'm inexperienced, what do I have to offer? And that still happens in some areas. And I think it's a matter of understanding that you don't have to be in a powerful position. You don't have to be an executive or, with 30 years of experience in order to add value. Because like I said, a compliment is something that people want. Gratitude, just saying thank you, is sometimes something that you can give to somebody from a really genuine point of view that will add value, that will give them something that they need. Or it could be, do your research and find an interesting point of view or an interesting insight that they haven't necessarily thought of. That's also significant. And so think really broadly about what you can give. It doesn't have to be expertise in the specific field that you're talking about. And number 4 was to find a higher purpose. Now, I'm not going to go into the philosophy and, meaning of life and religion and all of that. But the research did show that when we're networking, not just to grow my own network because I'm now looking for a job, but as part of an organization that I want to help, the broader organization, as part of, my personal philosophy around, women in tech is that there aren't enough of them, and that just being a woman who is on a stage can be helpful to other women. And so, finding a kind of higher level meaning or goal that helps be the reason that you're doing this for often helps people make it much, much easier. Now, this is all the research. This is not me. I'm just very much relating to it. And number 5 is actually my personal addition, and that is be proactive and don't expect anybody to do your work for you. So even if you've already created a conversation and, started to start talking to somebody, make sure you're doing your homework before that, who they are or some sort of context that will enable you to make that conversation more effective. And B, if you've already agreed to help somebody, or if they've agreed to help you with whatever it is, with passing your CV, with making an introduction, do as much of the road for them. Make it really easy. If somebody's making an introduction for you, write that blurb for them that they can then share more easily, that they don't have to make up and make an effort to help you. And I find that sometimes doing that homework for other people has taken me a long way in really getting, getting to the next step of whatever it is I wanted from a relationship with somebody. Questions, thoughts before I continue? I feel like I was talking at you a lot. There's a question in here: do Israeli startups network differently to move faster or stronger than others? That's a really good question. I think what's different about Israeli startups isn't the startups, but the Israeli culture part of it. As you can probably tell from me personally, and in general, if you've met Israelis, and we're pretty straightforward people. Like we aim for a goal and we go there really clearly. In some places, especially, in other cultures, in European cultures, that can be even, borderline rude, not to say way past the border. But I think that Israelis who find a way to balance, the straightforwardness and the aiming for the goal, with, understanding different cultures and how to do that in the right way, are really effective at, kind of not being shy, going for it. What in other cultures might be perceived as a little bit, pushy. But at the end of the day, everything is personal, right? So if I was maybe perceived to do something that's a little bit too pushy, but I managed to get in front of the person that I want to talk to and have a conversation and make a good impression because, I'm serious and straightforward and honest and open and genuinely looking for ways to be productive and helpful, then I found that resonates with people from all over the world. And in places where other people would kind of even hesitate making a first move, Israelis are often just, kind of going for it without looking both ways. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I find that that's very culturally characteristic of many Israelis, and definitely many Israelis in entrepreneurs and startups as well. I want to move on to talking about knowing your clients. And for this, before I talk, I actually need 2 volunteers to go into a breakout room for 1 second. So if you want to kind of do the course and participate and do a workshop. Yes, Anna, that's great. And one more. It's going to be a 1-minute thing, I promise, really quick. Great, Johan, I'm not sure I'm saying your names correctly. I'm sorry if I don't. So we're going to move you into the breakout room for 1 second. Are they gone? Are they in the breakout room? I think they are. Okay, I'm going to assume that they are. Yes, great. Okay, so what's going to happen is I'm going to ask them to come back in and sell me a banana. And that's it. That's all I'm going to tell them. What you guys know, and please don't ruin the surprise, is that for the purpose of this exercise, I'm not myself, I'm not Gali. I'm actually the CEO of a big, huge pharma company that's developing a cure for COVID. I usually say cancer, but here we are. And what this company has found is that there's a specific enzyme in this banana that we can produce that drug from. And so if they can sell me this specific banana with this specific enzyme, I will pay millions. Okay, now don't tell them that. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to ask them to just pitch me the banana. All right. All right, let's bring them back. And unmute them, of course. Are they back?
Having fun in the room because I told them to come back, but they're still there. So let's wait a second.
I promise this will be worth your time in a second.
I can join the room to tell them that we need them.
It will close in 32 seconds. So.
Okay.
In the meantime, Jens, I think, asked a very good question in the chat. If you want to check that out, Gali.
Yes, he was asking about the different styles of introverts and extroverts. And if both styles can lead to success, I think absolutely yes. I think that, you know, extroverts are the usual suspects for easy networking. And I think for extroverts, getting started is easier. But I think that introverts are actually a lot deeper in making sure that they bring the full meaning and the full intent to every situation. And so I think networking can be done in every style. You don't have to be loud and you know, in order to network effectively. On the contrary, I think at the end of the day, networking is about creating chemistry with, you know, in a one-on-one kind of situation. And in that situation, there's room for every single style and every single type of person. And I think it's more about making sure that you're bringing value to the table, both based on the fact that you know your own worth and on the fact that, you know what you're looking for, and that you're just authentically trying to be helpful and not only helping yourself, and also understanding that both are legitimate and that it's very clear that in business, we want to reach those win-win situations, right? And so I think style is almost nothing to do with it. I do want to move on. Do we have them back?
Have them back there. Sorry.
Okay. Anna, okay. So Anna, if that's okay, let's start with you. If we can unmute you, here we go. So what I told everybody and what I'll ask you to do now is to take 40 seconds on the clock, really, really quick, and to try to sell me a banana. Let's assume you have one. Let's say this is a banana. That's all I have here. Okay. Just sell me a banana.
Gali, did you take the breakfast today?
No, I didn't actually.
No? Are you hungry?
I am, yeah.
Have you memory problems?
As I get older.
Yeah, so you should have a banana. It's full of magnesium. It's good for your memory. And if you are hungry, it's a great food to start your day.
Great.
And give you energy.
Sure, yeah. Does it cost anything?
No, it's free. I have two. I can share one with you.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much.
You paid the value that you think it's worth it in the end.
Oh, that's a nice business model. Interesting. Sure, I'd love to. Thank you so much for that. All right, that was one. Thank you. I'll explain in a second what we just did there. Let's do another one real quick. Johan, where are you? I don't see in the Zoom.
I'm here.
Great. So let's do the same thing. If you want to just take 30, 40 seconds, a minute, sell me a banana.
Yeah, you like fruit?
I do. Most fruit.
Oh. Yeah. Bananas is something that we are interested in because it's a great fruit, good energy, and of course there are many other fruits, so we don't want to sell them to anyone that do not like bananas, maybe prefer ananas or apples. Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd love a banana, actually. A banana would be great
That's
right
great.
now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, it's a bit difficult. This is selling bananas, maybe not my favorite thing, but maybe to get to know you and to got a little
that
bit
is
left out.
Great. So does anybody want to tell them what I didn't tell them before? And this is absolutely not personal, please know this. Just another volunteer, somebody else? Go ahead and unmute yourself. Okay, I'll tell them then. So what I told everybody else when I send you out into the breakout room is that for the purpose of this exercise, I'm actually not just Gali, but I'm a CEO of a big pharma company that's developing a cure for COVID. And that cure comes from a specific enzyme of bananas that I'm willing to pay millions for. And you guys, as well as, by the way, 100% of the people I've ever done this exercise with, so like, don't feel bad in any way. you either gave it to me for free or, we're going to sell it to me for, whatever value I was willing to pay, or probably a few euros or something relatively small. Which obviously, I may have been very, very happy with that. But from your point of view, probably, as a person looking to sell a product, you probably could have gotten a lot more value or a lot more money for the product that you have in your hand, because this is actually worth potentially millions to me. And the reason that I'm kind of talking about this, I think, is because when we go into these kinds of situations, they often happen. Like, I've been to a million client calls and sales pitches and partner conversations where people kind of dive into their pitch. It happens a lot. And I think that the one thing that we're missing is actually making sure that we ask questions, that we start with asking questions, and that we do our homework in order to actually know who is this person standing in front of us and what are they interested in, right? And now I know 40 seconds is not a long time, but it actually isn't long enough to say, hey, what's your name? What do you do? Right? Like in this situation, it would have been, like, what are you working on, right? If I'm working on a cure for COVID, it's probably top of mind. It's the first thing I would have talked about if anybody had asked me. And again, please don't feel bad in any way or be put on the spot. I've done this exercise with many people. I don't know actually I know one person who asked enough questions to begin with. He was a very seasoned sales guy. So when I think about, knowing our clients and having meaningful conversations, the first thing that I think about is asking good questions, what we call effective questioning, right? And effective questioning goes hand in hand with active listening. So let's break those down for a second. Effective questioning is making sure that I'm asking deep questions, not just like yes or no questions, that will give me insight as to the people that are in front of me, or their business, or whatever it is, the subject in hand. So if it's a company that I'm trying to sell a product to, right? If it's a client that I want to make sure that I not only understand the specific context of the specific department that I'm talking to, or that, but I understand the bigger and broader context of the company's business, their business model. How do they make money? What do they do? What are their challenges? What kind of value they expect to get from me, and what kind of value they expect to get from others in the area. Who is the decision maker? Maybe it's not the person I'm talking to. Maybe just that specific understanding will take me from, conversation to X to conversation Y in terms of what I want to talk about. Because if it's not the decision maker, maybe I don't even want to talk to them about, the price of the product. Maybe it won't help them to even know that, or vice versa, right? And so the first part of that is really asking effective questions. The second part of that is making sure that I'm actually actively listening. And when I say active listening, and there's like a full on definition, it means, first of all, paying attention, right? Showing the people that I'm listening to them. So like nodding or, saying yes, and not even just showing, but actually providing feedback. So summarizing, saying, so if I hear correctly, what I understand is blah, 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 right? Or asking clarification questions that are not, answers or judgments, but are actually making sure that I understand. So things like, when you said X, did you mean this or that? Please clarify this for me. And the reason to do that is A, to truly understand, right? Because, and B, what happens, I think sometimes to everybody, especially, by the way, to Israelis, is we're not listening to listen, we're listening to answer. We're forming our answers before the people in front of us, like, instead of just really deeply listening. And what happens then is, yes, sometimes we'll be right, sometimes we know more. Sometimes we'll miss out on the actual intent, on the subtext, on the, on the deeper meaning of what's truly important to the other side. And if we miss out on that, it's really hard to understand the most important thing, which is the underlying why. Why are they talking to me? Why do they want to work with me or buy my product? What's the action or decision that they're going to take based on the value that me or my product or whatever it is that I'm offering, my service, is going to give them? Why do they want to buy from me or partner with me, or help me and send my CV to get me a new job? And if I ask questions and actively listen, and I don't even try to come up with quick answers, but I I let it go. The answers will come. We're all forming answers automatically all the time. And so fighting that instinct, fighting our active mind, and just stopping to ask questions and actively listen is a huge part of really getting all the information about the person in front of us, the client, the partner, that will then help us form the right answers, tailor the right products, do all of that. And so now, again, you always have to strike a balance, especially when you're talking to clients, right? They want to hear what your product is. They also have questions. They want to understand if you can add value to them. So obviously, I'm not saying, spend an hour only asking questions, don't tell them anything. There's always a balance to strike. But in that part, when we're trying to find out things, ask a lot of questions that are broader than the specific context that you're in, and spend time actively listening to them.
Can I ask a quick?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this exercise was great. Also, it also shows a little bit like you. Essentially, I expected to give a sales pitch, and you, you fooled me, tricked me. But
it wasn't personal.
The reason I'm not good at that is exactly what you say. Is that normally when I meet someone I don't know, and I don't know you in particular now, you have introduced yourself, but we played a game here. But I think it's because I often do not want to sell unless I know that this might be interesting. So first I'm interested to know the person, but I got a bit blocked there. But I think it was a really good learning for myself and maybe for the group also, that when people say, go and sell that, even if you say that to a coworker, the coworker might misunderstand you, think it's like a pitch, but it's maybe building a relationship and explore what is the best strategy at the meeting. I think, so great example. Thanks.
Thank you for that. I agree. I think it's, even if you have an hour to pitch someone and you don't know anything about them, I make sure to spend at least part of that hour asking questions and making sure before I jump into my, my presentation and all of that. By the way, that's something that I didn't get a chance to do here with you guys because the format is a little bit different. But had they given me a little bit more time, I would have asked, for everybody to maybe introduce themselves or write something. And that's part of the reason that we asked you to do that, for a little bit of context of what might be interesting to you. So I absolutely agree.
The next piece is trust. Can you still hear me? Great. Okay. Now, here I want to refer to experts that are way more experienced than myself. Behavioral psychologist called Dr. Robert Cialdini. I don't know if anybody of you have heard that name. He's basically a professor who wrote a book about influence, and he did a lot of research on basically how we persuade people, how we get people to say yes. And he wrote a bunch of books, and there's a lot of research out there, and I'm not going to go through all of it. But I think that there are 2 out of the 6 principles that he found that are super critical, not just to persuasion, but specifically to how to build trust. And so I want to play this really short video. There's 2 parts to it that I want to focus on. One is reciprocity, the giving back piece that we already talked about. And the other is liking, the getting people to actually like us from like a real point of view. So I'm going to play this really quick video and then we'll talk about that a little bit more. Please let me know if you can't hear anything. The sound will start in a second.
Researchers have been studying the factors that influence us to say yes to the requests of others for over 60 years. And there can be no doubt that there's a science to how we are persuaded. And a lot of this science is surprising. When making a decision, it would be nice to think that people consider all the available information in order to guide their thinking. But the reality is very often different. In the increasingly overloaded lives we lead, more than ever, we need shortcuts or rules of thumb to guide our decision-making. My own research has identified just 6 of these shortcuts as universals that guide human behavior. They are reciprocity, scarcity, authority, consistency, liking, and consensus. Understanding these shortcuts and employing them in an ethical manner can significantly increase the chances that someone will be persuaded by your request. Let's take a closer look at each in turn.
So the first universal principle of influence is reciprocity. Simply put, people are obliged to give back to others the form of behavior, gift, or service that they have received first. If a friend invites you to their party, there's an obligation for you to invite them to a future party you are hosting. If a colleague does you a favor, then you owe that colleague a favor. And in the context of a social obligation, people are more likely to say yes to those that they owe. One of the best demonstrations of the principle of reciprocation comes from a series of studies conducted in restaurants. So the last time you visit a restaurant, there's a good chance that the waiter or waitress will have given you a gift, probably at about the same time that they bring your bill. A liqueur perhaps, or a fortune cookie, or perhaps a simple mint. So here's the question. Does the giving of a mint have any influence over how much tip you're going to leave them? Most people will say no, but that mint can make a surprising difference. In the study, giving diners a single mint at the end of their meal typically increased tips by around 3%. Interestingly, if the gift is doubled and 2 mints are provided, tips don't double. They quadruple, a 14% increase in tips. But perhaps most interestingly of all is the fact that if the waiter provides 1 mint, starts to walk away from the table, but pauses, turns back, and says, for you nice people, here's an extra mint, tips go through the roof. A 23% increase, influenced not by what was given, but how it was given.
I'm going to stop for a second and skip to minute 7 to the part about reciprocity. Oh, sorry. Apologies for that. We're going to skip to this part.
The fifth principle is the principle of liking. People prefer to say yes to those that they like. But what causes one person to like another? Persuasion science tells us that there are 3 important factors. We like people who are similar to us, we like people who pay us compliments, and we like people who cooperate with us towards mutual goals. As more and more of the interactions that we are having take place online, it might be worth asking whether these factors can be employed effectively in, let's say, online negotiations. In a series of negotiation studies carried out between MBA students at 2 well-known business schools, some groups were told, time is money, get straight down to business. In this group, around 55% were able to come to an agreement. A second group, however, were told, before you begin negotiating, exchange some personal information with each other. Identify a similarity you share in common, then begin negotiating. In this group, 90% of them were able to come to successful and agreeable outcomes that were typically worth 18% more to both parties. So to harness this powerful principle of liking, be sure to look for areas of similarity that you share with others and genuine compliments you could give before you get down to business.
So let's break that down for a second. We talked the video, and by the way, we'll send you the link afterwards. I think it's an amazing video and amazing research in general. But basically the idea here is, first of all, reciprocity, right? I want to make sure that I'm giving someone, and I would even say giving someone something first. And in the sense of liking, by the way, compliments are something that we can give. And a lot of feedback that I get when I talk about this to people is, it doesn't feel authentic. It feels like I'm, trying too hard. I don't know this person. I don't like them yet. Why would I, do something like that? And my answer to that is, we can always find something to like about someone if we look. And we can always find common ground if we look. So in my personal case, I have a 3.5-year-old son, and when I was at Google, I was working, and he was born while I was at Google. And when I came back from my maternity leave, I realized, and this was to me a revelation at the time, that a lot of the counterparts and the partners that I work with are actually moms to young children, maybe even around my age, that I didn't have that in common before with. And I starting many conversations with like a 2-minute chat about how are your kids, how is my kid, are they sick, are they sleeping, all that boring, young kid stuff, which to my other colleagues with no kids was super boring, but created a really strong bond between myself and them because suddenly we all felt similar. so that's one on similarity. Another one is on compliments. So one of the best mentors I've ever had used to tell a story about how he used to sell door-to-door heating, like subfloor heating. And he'd walk into houses of all these people, and a lot of them were, you know, to be honest, not so pretty. And what he'd do is he'd look around on all the walls and all the furniture and everything, and between all of the very ugly pictures on the walls, he'd find the one thing he thought looked nice. It could be a vase or a picture on the wall or a sofa, or doesn't matter. And if he actually thought that one thing looked pretty, he would compliment that one thing. And that was enough, because then it's authentic. Like, and so, you know, like for me personally, I'm a shoes person back in the day when we left the house and wore shoes. And so when I go into an office or into an event, the first thing I do, especially with women, is I look at their shoes. Automatically, by the way, it's not something I'm trying hard to do. Like, this is who I am personally. But then as soon as I see something I like, I will always make sure to compliment it. Like, that was the one thing that I kind of took with me. And that in itself has been such a huge conversation starter for me over the years that I feel like, you know, just find the thing that is real for you, that feels really good and feels authentic to who you are and what is interesting you. And the reason that I'm talking about all this is because doing all of these things basically shows people that you care. And when you show people that you care about them, that's the way, in a real and authentic way, that's what builds trust. Like, people can smell that, right? And so once you care about who they are, what they're doing, and they start to trust you, and you've already asked them questions, as in the previous chapter, then we're starting to create something that's, you know, essentially a real human connection. Moving on to the next part before they tell me I'm totally out of time. Once we do that, so we have a connection, we've opened the door, we've got a beginning of a relationship. At the end of the day, we're probably selling something. You know, we are all in business. We have a product or a value that we want to provide. And in this sense, the tailoring, I think, bit is really important. So if we know who the client is and we know what they need, we also know that maybe they don't need 100% of what we have to offer, or our regular story isn't exactly what would fit or what would resonate with them. And so the way that I look at it is, you know, we've got our product, okay, and we've got the regular way that we want to tell the story. And maybe for one customer, you know, there's a certain part of the product, like the part here, I don't know if you can see my mouse, that would be relevant. And for another part, a customer, you know, it would be this part here that would be relevant. And for a third customer, it would be this part here. And what we want to just make sure we're doing is that we're not necessarily talking about all of the product or all of the benefits to all of the potential customers, but that we're really only talking about that specific part and tailoring our story to what is really interesting. And if we've asked the right questions and we know who we're standing in front of, that's usually relatively easy to do. Like, if we know what we have and we know what they need, creating that connection it's usually not even the hard part, right? Just making sure we're super minded to getting there is what we want to make sure that we're doing. And now it's also kind of a chicken and egg situation, right? Because if I knew exactly what to tailor to them, they would trust me much more, because I would give them what they need and I would show that that I care about them, that I've worked to tailor it. But I think that if we ask the right questions, then it's often something that we can do almost intuitively if we're trying to truly create a collaboration. And so just to keep it really short, I think that's the next part of what we really want. And by the way, I really appreciate that you guys are all writing in the chat, because I think that if you remember one of the things I said in the beginning about what are the first few things that you would take. For me, every time I watch this video, and it's 12 minutes, I strongly suggest that you guys kind of watch the full thing later on. I always make sure to look for one point that I'm less good at. So, you know, over the years, I've gotten really good at finding the right compliment to give, because I've been really minded to that. But I'm much less good at reciprocity when I've got a goal, because, you know, I'm Israeli, I've got I see a target, I run for it. And so I'm personally often much less good at the reciprocity part, at looking for what I can give them that they want before I try to look for what I want, right? And so that's something that every time I watch this, and I've watched this many times at this point, I try to make sure that I'm taking it with me and doing better, in my next client meeting this afternoon. And in that sense, that's kind of the one thing that I want everybody to remember and take with you. And doesn't matter if it's something that I said or something somebody wrote in the chat. I think that's what I'd like you guys to get from this. Last part before we move on, and hopefully we'll make this in time. So when we talk about like relationships, at the end of the day, boils down to many conversations. Some, emails, correspondences, acts of, and all kinds of things in the middle. But at the end of the day, we're talking about conversations, and hopefully one day real live face-to-face conversations as well. And again, I'm not going to go into storytelling, although I think we've touched upon some elements of that. But I think there's two parts of conversations that are often, overlooked when we're talking about how to tell a story or sell a product. The beginning and the end, right? So imagine a meeting, and again, let's kind of work with real live meetings, but this is absolutely true for online video as well. So in the middle, you've got the asking questions, understanding your client, and then telling the story and relaying the solution and hopefully tailoring it and only telling the right parts in the right way and all of that stuff. But before we get in that room, or the first minute that we get in that room, those first few seconds of the first impression are super, super critical to our success, as is the end. The tone at which we end, what we do, the next steps, all of that can often determine, how likely we are to succeed. And so I want to break down those parts for just a second. When I say set the tone, we're talking about almost everything. I think you're all aware of the fact that when you walk into a room, what you wear is important. That's why we all, dress up in a certain way for business and a different way for, casual encounters. But it's what I look like. It's what I say. It's how you present yourself. But it's also having an agenda and setting it in the beginning. Creating really clear expectations, which can be done before or at the beginning of a meeting. So during this meeting, we're going to talk about X, Y, Z. Here's what we want to achieve during this meeting. Making sure we do our homework, knowing the customer, the product, the competitor, the people in front of us, all of that stuff can create a huge difference in both the content and the way that we're addressing things. And even just the opening. So one thing that's really important, and he actually talks about it in the video in the opening, is what he calls authority. So explain to people why you have the authority and the experience to be talking about what you're talking about, or providing, the value that you're providing. And so, in this personal case, right, one of several reasons that I started with presenting myself, one is because I think, you guys have a right to know who you're talking to, but the second is the research, not my research, their research shows that you're more likely to respond well to somebody explaining to you about relationships if they can establish very quickly and early on that they have the experience in building relationships that, kind of entitles them to say that they are an expert or have something to say on that subject, right? And so all of those things, and on the other hand, maybe you're trying to create a meeting that's super casual and fun. You want to start with an inspirational video or something funny or connection. I often start client meetings when we're doing like a first kickoff with a client and we're doing a round of names. It used to be a round of names and where is your next vacation to, just to break the ice, just to keep it light. Now it's where I would wish I could get on a plane to. But just doing that and having that round and having a 2-minute casual conversation sets the tone in a certain way, which is different from, I don't know, a legal negotiation where that would probably be inappropriate. So to make a long story short, be very intentional about what kind of tone you're setting in the beginning of every conversation in order to achieve the goal that you're looking for. And then the other side of that is actually making sure you're achieving. So one is leaving enough time for summaries, which I'm trying very hard to do here and I may slightly fail at. 2 is writing things down, especially when we're talking about, a business meeting, a sales pitch, something that, is in a more businessy context. This webinar is actually an adaptation of a workshop that I've done with teams over like half a day. And so one of the things that we do during that half day is make sure that for every chapter in this workshop, we write down our key learnings, kind of the things that we're all taking away. And so at the end, we've got that summary written down and everybody knows what they want to do tomorrow morning or what's going to be written in that post that they're going to put on their screen tomorrow. For client meetings, it could be writing down action items, sending them over emails, deciding on action items and making sure we've left time to do that. Again, regardless of what those action items are, obviously you want to steer them in the direction that you want to steer them in. And obviously, and I'm sure that this is not new to anybody, but following up, emails, calls, whatever it takes. And ideally, getting agreement in writing or orally, but in front of other people, making sure that the person in front of you actually says yes to whatever it is that you're trying to get to, because people who actually say the word yes or write the word yes, and they know that other people have seen that, are more likely, and again, this is Cialdini's research, not my own, are actually more likely to actually do what they said yes to. And so that's probably a big deal, a big part of actually achieving that goal. Questions, thoughts? I haven't left much room for questions, I apologize. Okay. So to summarize, one of the best storytellers I know, when talking about building a pitch, a deck, a story, he always says, say what you're gonna say it, then say what you said. So this is me saying what I said. We talked about building and growing a network based on looking at it as an opportunity in general and an opportunity to give something to someone specifically. We talked about making sure we're asking questions and actually listening actively for the answers. We talked about, once we're already in the room, we're already talking to somebody, building a relationship based on trust, and doing that by being authentic about, trying to like the person and getting them to like us based on commonalities and similarities, based on actually giving them compliments. I know it sounds trivial, but it's true. It works in a good way. And finding the common ground to work on together. We talked about making sure that after we know all that we're not telling them the full story of all of the products that we sell, but that we're tailoring to the specific need that they have. And we talked about still making sure that while we're doing all that very casually and naturally and authentically, we actually have a certain structure of the meeting or the situation that we're in that will enable us to both start really well and sign off strongly in a way that will, kind of achieve what we want to do and get them to say yes at the end of the day to whatever it is. So that's it. And I'm right on time. So thank you everybody so much for listening. I really hope this has added a little tiny bit of value at the very least. Please, if you have another minute, do write to us in the chat, what you are taking from it, because I know that I'll learn from it as well. And I would say that's the one thing that I'd love to get from everybody here. If there's anything else I can do to help, you can find me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, Innovation Center Denmark, for having me, and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Gali. Thank you so much. I learned a lot about the importance of being authentic and pitching in an authentic way, selling in an authentic way. Thank you so much. If the participants want to know more or get in contact with Gali, you're more than welcome to contact us. Before we say goodbye, I promised you a guest performance, and it's conducted by Morten Møller, who is from a very important initiative back home in Denmark, a project that's called Early Warning, which helps companies to navigate out of a crisis and provide consultancy for them when they are in a dire situation, which is unfortunately is the case for many companies and startups these days. So Morten, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lasse. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I've been the quiet type so far, but I promise that's going to end now. I'm the program manager of the program Early Warning in Denmark, and I'm also the network coordinator of the Early Warning Europe network, which is now a Europe-wide initiative strengthening the resilience of companies when they get into trouble. So what is it? Well, in Denmark, we started in 2007, meaning that we are now almost 15 years old. And what we do is we try to assist companies in a crisis, to avoid bankruptcy by seeing the crisis signs in time before they become unmanageable. That is fortunately very often the case, but it also means that when we help companies build resilience, we help them act on in time and so on. Unfortunately, there are some where the manager simply does not have the capacity to see these things before it's too late, meaning before the debt becomes unmanageable, or before the company is simply running out of options for becoming profitable again. When that happens, we help companies close down fast and with the minimum possible cost. And that's because we've been making some measurements to see that actually the biggest losses occurred just in the very last phase before a bankruptcy. And very often a bankruptcy is the best option for the entrepreneur, that allows this person to move on with a new business venture based on experience and not be stuck in an unfavorable situation. In that sense, early warning is growth policy. It is resilience policy for SMEs, simply because when we help turn companies around, we bring them back on track for growing. Our long-term mission is to fight the traditional idea of what does it mean to get into trouble with a company. Does it mean that I'm an idiot, or does it mean that now I gain experience that helps me and all my business partners to a better future? In that sense, well, a crisis is not necessarily my fault. I mean, if I sell something for music festivals or cruise liners these days, there's a good chance that I'll not be able to sell anything. Now, is that because I've been taking a lot of stupid decisions, or is it simply because my market has disappeared? And that is where we can go in and help companies. And this is very much about the theme of today's workshop. It's very much about strengthening networks and relations for the companies that get into difficulties. We're based, I mean, some of you may know the Danish system of business hubs, so we're all over the country, and that's the same model we're building around Europe. It works. When we see the many companies that we help, considering that many of them unfortunately come very late, as something in the region of 55% of the companies survive, a third of them close with our help, and the last portion of them are restructured, or they close without insolvency, or they reduce operation to hobby size companies, and all of these are based on what's the best solution in the situation for the company. We also see that comparing with a placebo group, the companies that we assist, they have a lower loss of turnover and a considerably higher first-year growth after we've been helping trim their organization for the new market conditions that they're in. And then we can also see that professionalizing their procedures and professionalizing their networking and their relation building is definitely an element adding value. A professional board of directors is a good example of this, as opposed to the sometimes haphazard boards that we come across with friends and family. We also see, and this is relevant to the COVID situation right now, that problems that occur acutely and don't build up over time tend to be easier to manage, because the companies will tend to be healthier. The way we work is that we have a core network of business consultants based all over Denmark, and then we have a network of more than 100 mentors, and these are senior managers, senior specialists, and I would say we can almost cover every single possible problem that companies have, and all business sectors as well. They are people who share their experience for nothing. We make sure we give them good capacity building and a glass of wine from time to time, but they don't make money from helping companies. In addition, we have a cooperation with a group of the best insolvency lawyers in Denmark, who also give their time for free, which is a rare case for lawyers. Those of you who work with them know what this is about. But they actually give some of their time for free to help these companies to the best solution. And what we do is confidential, it's impartial, and it's free of charge for the companies. Many will tend to go to their accountant, to their lawyer, to their banker, to their management consultant whenever the first crisis signs come, which is really good if you can pay for it, but you will pay for it. That's sort of the opposite logic of what we do. When we try to look at when is it timely and when is it too late to save a company that's getting into trouble, well, it's really the options are really limited when you get to the red light bulb in the left hand side of the screen, where the overdraft facility in the bank is spiraling out of control. You're missing payments to your creditors. The bank starts asking for guarantees for extending credit lines. You start owing money in corporate taxes and VAT and social security, and you see that your turnover and your profit are going the wrong way. All this is what we can call a liquidity crisis. You will run out of money very soon if these are the signs in your company. But on the other hand, no company ever grows at a steady, sustained pace all the time. All companies get into difficulties sooner or later. And the yellow light bulb really shows the kind of signs that good managers should react on. And that's where you can start to see, okay, I don't actually have an overview of my budgets, or the budgets are not really what I need to gain this overview of the company. Same goes with management structures, and same goes with the kind of advisory functions that you have. It could be the accountant, the banker, the IT guy, the management consultant, your corporate lawyer, and so on. And that leads to an unclear strategy. Of course, then there are the kind of along the way factors. Everybody can fall and break a leg. Sometimes it's very stressful to run a company, so it's important to know how to react on these signs. And when you lose your overview, well, experience from these many companies that we've helped shows that people tend to get the kind of tunnel vision where you only focus on a few possible solutions, probably some that have already proven to be inefficient in the past, and you don't really see what's there, which is what a good mentor and a good consultant can help do. So why am I saying all this in this forum of startups and budding entrepreneurs? Well, because we see that the kind of startup advice that's given in the business promotion system, in academia, in vocational training is sort of this idea that the sky is the limit. You just have to work hard enough, and then George Soros is going to come and buy you. The reality is that half of all companies that are created don't live to see their 5th birthday. So no, George Soros is not going to come and buy all companies as long as you work hard enough. There is a need for seeking advice and knowing what the first crisis signs are before things get out of hand. We have a project called Rescue. Rescue is, oh, someone is drawing on my screen. That's cool. We have a project called Rescue that really strengthens this effort by taking the knowledge that we have from the thousands of companies helped and bringing it into the startup advice given in business incubators, in universities, vocational training, business promotion, all the spheres that are there helping startup companies. Well, we're trying to bring in this knowledge in these forums. We're targeting young companies, students, but also the advisory functions, the facilitators around them. There's 5 partner countries, and the idea is that next year we will be out all over EU 27, bringing knowledge, advice, tools, everything based on the hands-on experience that our big group of mentors has from helping companies. And this very much builds on a list of indicators, including relationships, good management structures, knowing your markets, knowing how to make realistic strategies, and knowing how to insert your new company, which probably has the best idea in the world. New companies tend to have that, but insert it into a realistic framework where you, among others, get access to the market relations and the market structures that allow you to be resilient and to succeed. That was a very, very short pitch, and it was certainly shorter than Gali's. I hope to have sparked a little bit of interest. Earlywarning.dk, you know where to find us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Martin. So thank you very much for your attendance today. We hope you learned new things. And that said, we just hope you'll have a nice day. And also, I hope to see you, or we hope to see you next week, same time, same place. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you, Gali, and everyone. See you next week.